See the vibration? Okay, we're on. All right, today's the last day of September. It's Wednesday, the 30th. So hopefully when we put this on, we get the right date and time. Okay, on the board, there is no quote today, but the quotes were due today. So if you have them here on your way out, you could turn them in or check them off. If you don't want to pull out your quotes or rip them out, that's fine for people who are here. If not, your other people need to submit them and get them in to me. And then Friday we'll start with the new quote, number 14. So in the Populi grade section, it just says quote check number 1. Then there'll be quote check number 2, number 3. We didn't erase that, but online, I want you to watch this American History, Vote 'em Out. And these guys who are here today already know this, but look at the title. Notice it says Vote 'em Out, not him out, or one of these days, her out. Vote 'em out. That includes a president and Congress. Okay. Also within the video, I want you to notice the race and the genders. When they're voting in the ballot box, you'll see black, white, brown hands. When you look at the voting poll ballots of curtains, you'll see the bottoms of people's legs, and you'll notice genders there of young people, old people, and man or ladies. Just keep that in mind. It's a real simple song. So it's coming close, and you're going to be heavily involved in it as you go through the stages of life. You'll be voting many times, so you'll have your chance to vote them out. Okay. Hopefully everything works again, and we're going to talk about some more stages of the American history. And I'm going to emphasize today some specific things that are happening to enter the American Revolution and the revolution that America's going through now. There is great likeness and symbolism. Okay, if I get to the right page. Okay, I remember mentioning this guy right at the end of class, and it has to do with the Revenue Act, where we left off, and the Sugar Act, which is the same thing, and George Grenville. Okay, and this was approximately 1764. We're going to be looking at about 5-6 years of how things develop in stages and steps that lead to the big and final conflict that leads to war, and eventually our. But anyway, when Grenville comes in as a representative for the British, or the Commonwealth, or whatever you want to call them, I want you to notice that he brings some both good and bad ideas. And the good idea was to follow the idea that the king wanted done. The king wanted America and the British to basically get along. But as you see, they're not smart enough to compromise and to check each other often enough. Also, I mentioned last time, there's a 3-month gap of communication. Even if it's a personal handwritten letter or an edict, it took that long for them to sail across and get the information, or even, let's say, trade. It took that long. So there's a big gap. When you have that much gap, a lot of things can get twisted. A lot of people can take advantage. And this is what Grenville and a couple other people do. They take greed into account of personal needs, worldly needs, over what was best for everyone. And that's pretty common, and they saw a way to take advantage of it. Okay, as we already stated, as the Navigation Acts were put into place, at first there wasn't a real way to enforce them, so some more acts come in and add fuel. When the first acts, the Navigation Acts, were in place, people started to grumble. People started to organize themselves. I don't know, I can't remember if I mentioned this. The Sons of Liberty was one of the first organized groups to protest. You know, you had individuals and you had smaller groups of people, but the Sons of Liberty had a little more pizzazz in that they were willing to take chances, be more violent, and actually do some things that, let's say, us people, students and teacher in this class, we may not want to do it, but when you have another 40 people over here doing it, and we kind of believe in the same process, we might join in. And you think about it, the Sons of Liberty probably didn't think of it that way. They were just a group that were willing to go out on the limb and do it, but all of a sudden they had more followers and more followers. So keep that in mind. This occurred for about a 2-year period, 1764, 65, 1766. All this was transitioning. It wasn't just instant. Now, there's an individual, the character that comes up that you need to put down, and his name is, in 1767, Charles Townshend. He's already over here, but he has made trips back to the motherland and back to America, and he tells the British Commonwealth people and the House of Commons and the King that he knows another way to increase revenue. Now, we established last time we met that the troops that were left here were to do this and do that and to protect and to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, but it was expensive because of the 7 Years' War and all those. In a quick review, Townshend said, hey, you know, in order to do some things, you got to back off a little bit, and you got to adjust, and you got to adapt, and you got to adopt. I wonder where you heard that. But you got to do some things, and I can guarantee you that you will get more money for what you want if you do what I tell you or what I'm suggesting you do. Okay, and Townshend picked on some things that made more sense if you look at it history-wise. We're going to add larger taxes, but we're going to narrow it down so it doesn't seem so bad. He creates, he tells the king, says, what does America need more than anything? They already have this, this, this. One of them, of course, would be, agriculture. They don't have the big-time factories. And here's what America was wanting from Europe. They needed things like glass. They didn't have ways to make glass over here yet. They needed, he said, they really need paint or forms of paint to help preserve the wood. He goes through all this in great detail. They need paper. They don't have a way to make paper over here because, they got newspapers, but they don't have the press and the way to make the paper yet here. And we're exporting it to them. And I noticed they really love tea. Because there are British, and British tend to drink their tea, do their little thing. It says, if you concentrate your efforts on these imports from Europe or from the British colony, you'll get more money, even though if you don't make large tax jumps, but you concentrate on these. And then the next thing you need is more enforcement. I suggest Townsend says, that we take a lot of our troops that are here and place them around the one major port, and that's Boston, the Boston area. And they do so. And we can control this and increase this. So that's what happens. And of course, the common folks in the colonies now label this the Townsend Revenue Acts. So there's an official title now, and it came about in 1767. And if you're looking for, it's in your text, by the way. Now, not only moving the troops, not all of them, but a good share of them to this area, we need to do a couple more things. We need to create special commissions and custom agents. They actually called them custom agents, like policemen, that make sure that these ports are going to collect the taxes on entry by the ships, or we're going to take the ships away, or they won't destroy them, but they'll take them over. And they won't get their supplies until they pay the duties or the tariffs or the tax. Now, this occurs in a 6-month period. Then he says, you've got to add one more thing. The court systems that we do have here in New America, they got to be there to back up this idea or these laws. And that way our agents can enforce it, and the troops are already there. We can make them do it, or we will take it away from them. They won't get the special treatment. Now, this is all done first in Massachusetts, in that colony, and this is where the center is. Of course, you know where Boston is, and this is where it is. Now, the existing Sons of Liberty and other people, here we go again, some more taxes, just in a different way, and that's pretty common. You guys are seeing that right now in life. We got more taxes. What tax does this state have that Oregon doesn't have? You should know that, just like that. Sales tax. That's a tax. That's an import duty. I'm going across to buy my car in Oregon where I don't have to pay sales tax. How do they make up for it? Well, the cars cost more, or they could. Okay. And these guys, meaning Townsend and his groupies, they realize that, this might happen, so we're going to make sure we blockade them from going to other ports right now. Now, the one thing they didn't count on was the colonies having such a great communication network in place. And that's why they needed paper. But the newspaper prints, they had pamphlets, and they had, they didn't have 40-page newspapers or anything like that. But they had access, and they got it spread out quickly up and down the east and west, or the east coast, not west. And they were able to communicate the good and bad, and they were making sure, and this is kind of like today, the press wasn't always honest, but they'd say, hey, if you don't want this to happen in Virginia, you better join in, and you better be aware of this. And this took a while, but it got, and the Sons of Liberty and other individuals and groups helped do this. And I don't want you to think that just the Sons of Liberty, but it was a general being of all the colonies. A light bulb went on, and they saw what was happening, and they wanted to do something about it. Now, in your textbook, they refer to it as one of the critical mistakes that the British made, and that was to bring all those troops in, to put those agents into place, to add those taxes and enforce them through the court system. And so that is one of the major critical mistakes they make. They're going to make a few more here in a little bit. Now, this was occurring in late 1767, and then within a 6-month period, February of 1768, this is when the transition got spread to the other colonies. And the other colonies, as I mentioned, they said, hey, we're going to join you, Massachusetts. We're going to help you because you're helping us see what's coming for us. Because eventually down in Florida and Virginia and Carolinas, it's going to happen to you guys too. As you grow even more and your ports and imports are... So basically everything was, one more time, was sent to Boston Port. It was the biggest at the time. And then from there, the ships would go to the other colonies. And then guess what? They had to pay another tariff to put their ships into port. So they said, beware. Now, here's a correlation into what happened in here in America now. This occurs with all the redcoats. We're going to call them the British Army, the redcoats, because that's what they wore. Being on patrols, walking around, making sure everything was going well in the Boston Harbor and the Boston area. Groups would come around. I don't know where you saw this before, but they call them mobs. They call them gangsters. But in your textbook, they only mention a little bit of rock throwing. And but they'd sneak around in the night, and instead of smashing windows, because we didn't have many windows, but they would throw things as the troops would go by and then run like heck, like little rats. But possibly set fires, possibly broke this, damaged this. But they were attacking the redcoats secretly. You know, this was going on for quite a while. And it was centered in the Boston area, but, you know, the British were getting a little bit tired of it. And, of course, the press was making it much worse than it really was, because the redcoats really weren't doing anything other than just patrolling, showing strength of force by walking around in the streets. Hey, you know, if you get out of line or you don't do what you're told on these port duties, we will step in because we're here. We're ready to go. They didn't do anything. And likewise, the press of its time did a little fudging and lying and not telling the truth. And they were getting other people outside the area to believe in it too. Sound familiar? It's supposed to go like this. Think about it, it is. Instead of throwing bottle rockets and things that they use nowadays, they were just throwing rocks and apples and tomatoes. Anything that looked like I think your text even said they threw snowballs. In the wintertime, you can make a snowball pretty hard. We used to. Get it a little wet. Ice hurts a lot worse than a snowball. Anyway, these mobs actually grew in size. Instead of having maybe 10 guys, and it was mostly guys in those days, I'm sure there might have been a few women involved, but they grew. And, hey, we're going to take 20 of us, and we're going to be over at this end of the street. They called it King Avenue, by the way, named after King. We'll be down at this end of King Avenue. As they come by, we'll pelt them down here, and you pelt them down there. You know, it was kind of organized. And I think if you got hit enough, you would get a little upset. Okay, now, one of those encounters, and it was right by the headquarters. Of course, you got to have a headquarters for all the guys that don't do anything, but they tell the troops what to do. But they patrolled the area, and right at that time, the mob was bigger. Guess what happens, as the book says, they get fired upon by the redcoats. They make it, well, the history books say there was, at this time, hundreds of mobs, people doing this. And they shot into the mob and they killed 5 people. 5. And history has labeled it just 5, not 500. But guess what? The press, when it spreads out the news to everyone, they call it a massacre. There might have been, we'll make up numbers here. There was 500 people, and only 5 got killed. But anytime you kill somebody, that's one too many, right? But is that a true massacre? A massacre means to me is when most of the group is killed. Now, there's another correlation I wanted to bring out. And I was around, and I didn't have to go there, but I was part of the Army National Guard, and they got activated. I don't know if you remember the Kent State riots, protests on the campus of Kent State. The National Guard fired upon them, on the students. Bless you. That is why we used to carry our weapons, but we carry ammunition, but it was on your belt and it was never in your rifle. Well, after that happened, we couldn't even have ammunition. We were just symbolism of an empty rifle. No bayonets. Everything was in a big truck behind us if we needed it. Of course, we would have probably got killed before we could, but that never happened to me. But that's how they did it. They said, well, you're not going to have loaded, and even your officers in charge will not have pistols or anything that are loaded. But anyway, the similarity, there is one there. That was in 1770. Oh, 1960, I'd have to look it up. It's in the 1960s, I believe, or the early 70s. Even the history teacher doesn't know the exact dates, but I was in the service from 66 to 72. So I know it was in that period of time. How's that for estimation? But this happened in 1770, and it seemed like the curse was every 6 months or 4 months, 6 months, 4 months, something was happening. And this was labeled the Boston Massacre. And it's in your history books. And again, they use that outlandish word to me. A massacre is pretty deadly and pretty violent. Do we have any of those that's happened lately? Think about that. Okay, now, after this so-called massacre happens, the British send another person who's already been back and forth, and his name is Lord North. Now, he was sent, he already was here, but he goes over and gets all the info. He lies. He says things to make the king and the parliament think it was a massacre. Yeah, and we were all being threatened. We could all been killed, so we had to fire upon him. But he does his thing. He comes back with orders to restore order, to make it more peaceful and tranquil, to do some adjustments. Now, he comes back with a pretty good idea, but it was the only good one. But he twists it a little later for his own personal needs. And he says, in order to keep these people under control and not have this going on, we need to drop these taxes. Yeah. Vote them out, so to speak. Except, we got to keep one because we got to have a little bit of revenue. Tea. And you know as well as I do what that's going to lead to later. We'll still tax tea, but we're not going to tax the glass and the paper and all the vital imports that these Americans need. But we're going to keep the one on tea, and hopefully that will, make this all calm down. Well, it did for a while, and it lasted about another couple of years. Meanwhile, Lord North lied, and he actually said, we didn't abolish all the taxes, but we reduced them so much, I'm going to take the money from those other taxes. I'm going to give the king the money from the tea tax at full value, but I'm going to hoard this other money, and I'm going to increase my wealth and my glory and my personal power. Now, already in place in this area, there's another gentleman. A lot of guys today. Thomas Hutchinson. He was a little bit like Lord North, but he was already here, and he was basically American. Of course, he came from Europe, but he had lived here long enough that he's basically here to help his colony and the Americans in it. Now, he realized that Lord North was being corrupt and lying and taking advantage of the taxation situation. So what he does is he puts the word out, beware of Lord North. Your textbook doesn't say it that way, but that's what it symbolized. Beware of this guy. He's representing Britain, but he's also embezzling and taking things for his own personal gain. And he's staying out of trouble with the king by making sure, this other money and stuff is getting to. So, people in America and the colonies, once Thomas Hutchinson gets the info out, another gentleman steps in who later becomes named after a famous beer. Oh, wait a minute, he's president. Samuel Adams. This is a famous beer. And that's how the beer got its name, by the way. They realized that, hey, how can they survive over there on one tax on tea? And so they keep spreading the word, and Samuel Adams sets up a very important committee. It's called the Committee of Correspondence. And this is to communicate warnings and issues and to other colonies. Well, the other colonies catch on, and they set up their own committees. Guess what this does? When you got one committee in Massachusetts, one in Virginia, one in Carolina, this kind of gives you some unification. Hey, our brothers and sisters, I got to put sisters in there. Male dominance, but still. Our brothers and sisters down here are doing this, and we're doing it. We have a common cause. We're not going to allow this taxation without representation or illegal taxes to happen. We're not going to let Lord North grow with his little group of people and still taxes and not be telling the British Parliament. We are not going to allow that to happen. Now, this occurs all the way into and up to the spring of 1773. And the provocation of the next huge step that leads to more violence and more things. And we're going to stop here for today. We didn't cover a lot of pages in your text, but we covered a lot of people and information and technically how it relates to what's going on in our society right now. And there are corrupt people out there taking advantage of it. This leads to the comment I'm going to make, and then we'll come back to that on Friday. The Boston Tea Party and what happens again in the Boston area and the Boston major harbors. It's what your text calls the final provocation. It was the final blow that we've had enough, and we're going to do something. We're going to make our own armies, and our own people are going to unite. So there we go. We're just about ready to start the revolution. Okay, would you mind turning off the camera? Thank you, guys. Remember, this is Wednesday, the 30th September session on the video. Hopefully you got a lot of... Don't forget, when you see the posting of Vote 'em Out, make sure you listen and watch for those things. Not very long, but it's kind of fun to watch Willie. Anyway, thank you. Later, Gators.